One of the last conversations I had with my father before he passed away, I think it was the last conversation we had, one of the things he said to me was to have an intimate relationship with God. And that was really important to him. That's the way he lived. And it's something he wanted me to know as he was going through and talking about each of the members of our family. And I think at the time he was just making peace with all of that before he left this plane. And it's interesting that my father shows up for me at different times and in different ways. And I've talked about before that I hear his voice sometimes when I'm playing racquetball and he's coaching me. And he's generally with me when there's beautiful music playing. And I felt him for some reason when we were meditating this morning prior to service. I felt him during that song with the young people singing. And sometimes what I feel is this flush all over me, like I get goosebumps that just raise up. And for some reason I just have a knowingness that it's him and not my mother or not my sister. And so it's just an interesting thing, but I just come to revel in it and feel it, and it's okay if I get choked up, and I usually do. And so I kind of thought maybe he was here this morning to hear me sing. So he was a wonderful singer, had a beautiful, beautiful tenor voice. So I'm kind of in this right now. So yes, in this having an intimate relationship with God, in our unity principles and oneness, it's a different kind of experience, I think, for us. So last week we talked about autopilot. And I was telling a story about how I am often on autopilot, but that autopilot comes from my baggage and the dysfunction, some of the dysfunction I grew up with. And that if we can switch autopilot to affirming our oneness and being in that oneness, then life shifts for us in a big way. So our affirmation last week, and I gave it out on little cards, was I and the Father are one. And I talked about how Jesus often said that, especially before his demonstrations with miracles, where he would invoke his divinity, and often out loud, for the disciples' benefit and for the crowds that were with him. In fact, he did that before the miracle of the loaves and the fishes. And so he said, the Father and I are one, and called in that divinity. And so I talked last week about and offered to you to try that during your week. Did anybody try it? See what that was like? So I did too. And it was interesting because it's one thing to affirm it, it's another thing to live it. And our fifth unity principle is says that it's not enough just to study principle, we must live it. I mean, that's what they're for. So it's interesting to me, the little things that changed for me because I was adamant about trying to live that principle. You know, when I go into stores or any public establishment where people are working, I love, when I first moved here to the South, because I grew up in the Northeast, that people greeted us so warmly when you walk in the stores. In fact, it kind of set me off a couple of times when I first moved here because I didn't expect it, because we don't do that in the Northeast. And so to walk in the store and have somebody say, "Good morning, how are you?" was wonderful. And so now I look for it when I go in places. But I've usually waited for them to do it first, and for me to be the one who says it and offers it. And so I noticed Monday morning when I went to the gym, all of a sudden I thought, why am I waiting for them to say good morning to me? Why don't I go in shining the light first? And so I did. I said, good morning, how are you? And they looked a little disturbed for a second.
Do you ever try to surprise people when you do that?
All the time, especially when I'm walking in the morning.
I know. When I was going to rehab, I would go in there and I would say, good morning, people. And I would, like, where you come from?
But you know what? If you've ever worked with the public, you know how challenging it can be. And I worked retail for a little bit in my 20s. There are some days that are tough, especially if you're not coming in with the best attitude, and if you're not affirming your oneness with the divine, it can be hard to look at people continuously as they walk in and say, good morning, how are you? Good morning, how are you? Enjoy your workout, or have a nice shopping experience, or let me know if I can help you. So the onus is on us. So that's one of the things that shifted. You know, when Jesus talked about shining the light, he didn't say wait till somebody else shines theirs first before you shine yours. Just shine all the time. And so I switched automatically all through the week, and every time I walked in someplace or looked at somebody, I said good morning and I smiled to them, at them. That was different for me.
I do it all the time.
You'd become a Texan.
Maybe I'm a born-again Texan. Maybe that's what that is. And that's one of the small things, but I think God is in the details of our lives. It's not just the big things. It's not just Sunday morning. It's in those little things where we get called to be who we are, which is divine. So during the week, as I was affirming, I and the Father are one, it cropped up during the day. It cropped up as I was working. It cropped up as I was on the phone talking to people. It changed my conversations. It changed how I felt. I seemed to be, I wouldn't call it a better mood, but it seemed like my vibration was a little higher, and I had more of a knowingness about the divine and about God throughout my day. Maybe that's what my Father was talking about when he said have an intimate relationship. Because don't we in our intimate relationships seek out the people we love and spend time with them and enjoy that time? And we look for them, and they want them to look for us. Spirit is omnipresent, always here, always calling to us, yearning for us. I think Spirit is in that still small voice, the intuition, the messages that we get during the day that guide us to do or don't do as we progress through each hour. And if you affirm that and know that and believe it, then I think the guidance is, I guess, more present. I think it's always there, it's just whether or not we're tuned in. And for me, the affirming of I and the Father are one kept me tuned in during the day. So I knew more often when to rest, when to work, when to call someone, when to say something special, how to show up. Whether it was within my own home, which is my husband and myself, or when I'm out in public, or in a meeting. Life is often the mundane, I think we usually talk about. You know, those details that we kind of get lost in everything we have to do. But that is our life. And the mundane can become miraculous if we are aware of the omnipotence and the omnipresence of Spirit and our oneness with it. So that it's not just about some entity hovering over us, watching and judging, but the omnipresence that is us. You know, I've talked before about the night I finished my book and was sitting in my living room with my laptop on my lap, looking at the finish line and being able to finish. I had a few things to do, probably not more than 4 or 5 things to do to close it up, but I was sitting there in my doubt and fear, looking at the finish line, crying, feeling all my doubts, my fears, my dysfunction, the brokenness that I thought was me. And it was in that moment that I started to hear the still small voice that said, no, that's not what you are. You were born to write this. Finish it. It's right there. I was looking at the finish line and still pausing, afraid to step forward. It was like this. I didn't have chapters to write. I had small changes to tweak and was still sitting in my doubt and fear. And then I heard the still small voice said, no, for this you were born. This is who you are. And then I finished. And I cried again, but for joy. Yeah, for being in that moment when I was that oneness. When I was that divinity, when I expressed that divinity, I felt it all over me, like we did during that song. I felt the goosebumps, some people call them God bumps, rise up on my arms. They were all over me. And in those moments when we step into our oneness and express it, I think we start to feel it, and that's the experience of God, the intimacy with God. Because intimacy with God, I believe, is palpable. Whether it's your heart or your mind or your soul or even this flesh on your arms. It's a miraculous thing. But it takes us stepping into the divinity to feel it. In the mundane. The mundane. There is nothing that is mundane. It's all miraculous because God is in all of it. That means you are in all of it, but choosing to express divinity or not. So this affirmation, I express my faith with every choice I make today. What do you choose? Again, here we are. You can choose to live from the divinity that you are, the oneness that is us, the absolute realm that is God, where you can be nothing else, but whether or not you embrace it and shine it forth is different. Here we are again. Don't we have this conversation often? But this is where the rubber meets the road. the rubber meets the road. So it may be as easy or as simple as smiling at somebody and saying, "Good morning, how are you? Have a fantastic day." And yes, people are caught off guard because they're feeling the mundane. They may be feeling the weight of the world. And it's for us to shine our divinity brightly, brilliantly at them and let them know there's something else. And I can share mine with you because it's unlimited. And I think we often don't share because we feel like we don't have enough. That somehow it's going to be depleted, or we're feeling depleted. But there is no depletion if we're recognizing our oneness. There is none. It's absolute. And so I noticed that too. As I affirmed, I and the Father are one, that I had more energy. That I could flip my switch from not feeling like I had enough to knowing that there's far more than I ever thought possible. I did it in my workout this morning, wanting to quit before it was over. Because my body was talking to me through it. And I could have quit. And I had to say out loud, the Father and I are one. Sometimes you have to say it out loud. And then it gets easier to say because it doesn't feel, like we talked about last week, blasphemous. And it doesn't feel wrong, or it doesn't feel out of alignment. We have to invoke it loudly sometimes. Maybe it's also to shut off the other stuff that's talking to us. That's saying, my body hurts. That's saying, I don't feel like saying good morning. They should speak to me because they work here. That's what I was thinking all the time, walking in. You're getting paid to be nice to me. Speak to me. I deserve it. Right? If we are the light of the world and we're shining all the time, not hiding the light under a basket, then shine. I don't know that it takes any more energy to shine than it does to hide. I actually felt more tired, more exhausted in my days when I was doing more hiding and running than shining. It's exhausting. It takes more work to hunker down and contract than it does to open up and just let it pour forth. I and the Father are one. I and the Father are one. One morning I woke up and I just looked at myself, really. My hands, my feet, my arms, the skin on me. I and the Father are one. This is a creation. This body is a wonderful creation. And even when we abuse it, it still works. And it still gets us through our day. And it still powers us through. It's a miraculous thing, this body that we move around in, performing trillions of operations without you having to think about it. Bruce Lipton believes cells are sentient beings because he's watched them with a high-powered microscope. And they cooperate and work together. They communicate with each other. Think how miraculous that is. You can't count fast enough for the time it takes for your brain to have a thought and your arm to move. Can't say it quickly enough. To count it. To time it. So we're walking around in this miracle all the time with blinders on. It's time to take off the blinders. Take the basket off of our heads. Let the light shine. And shine brilliantly. That's our work. And go and change the world. Even if it's your little world within the four walls of your home. Your job. You are the light at your job. You are the light wherever you show up. And it's your oneness with Spirit. This thing that can't be severed ever. Ever. That enables you to do that. So when you're feeling like you can't, invoke it just as Jesus did. I and the Father are one. And go and be a miracle to yourself and someone else. Every single moment of every single day. Let's take this into meditation.